Keeping our elected officials and those running for high office in a safe mode throughout their conduct. We've got to do this together, both parties, for the good of our nation. Political violence and vandalism is never, never acceptable. I yield the floor.
U.S. Senator Dick Durbin yesterday talking about a hearing that's going to be happening in less than an hour in Washington, D.C. with the Senate's Judiciary Committee, looking into the attempted assassination of former President Donald Trump. So 10 a.m. their time, 9 a.m. our time, so less than an hour. Senator Durbin is going to be leading that. It's a joint committee hearing with the Homeland Security Committee as well and the U.S. Senate. They'll be talking with several officials to get to the bottom of some of the important questions there are concerning what happened on July 13th in Butler, Pennsylvania. It is Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. Tons to tackle today, and each and every weekday morning you can wake up with us here with America's Talking Network. Like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell with the Center Square and Illinois in Focus Daily. So let's go ahead and hear a little bit of what Senator Durbin had to say yesterday on the U.S. Senate floor. As the senior Illinois U.S. Senator, he's also the Majority Whip and chairs the Senate Judiciary Committee. A very important committee in the U.S. Senate to oversee a variety of things. Here's Senator Durbin yesterday on the Senate floor.
But this assassination attempt has exposed more than just the continued threat of gun violence in America. It has also revealed unacceptable security failures in the operations of the United States Secret Service. Despite the implementation of a security plan to secure the rally site on July 13th, the shooter involved was able to fly a drone outside of the security perimeter for 11 minutes. His suspicious activity was reported twice, and he was spotted on the roof of a building prior to taking his first shot. Yet his violent plan continued unimpeded, and he was able to fire 8 shots before a Secret Service counter-sniper killed him. The implications are terrifying. When a mere 2 days after the shooting, the Secret Service needed to secure the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee. And in less than a month, the Secret Service must secure the Democratic National Convention in Chicago, in our home state of Illinois. Between now and November 5th, Vice President Harris and former President Trump will hold countless political events with thousands of Americans across the country. The Secret Service will need to secure all of these major events, but the agency needs first to restore our trust in its ability to do so.
So I think that's a pretty important aspect here in talking about, of course, the countless rallies that are expected with both the presumptive Democratic nominee, Kamala Harris, and the Republican nominee, Donald Trump, but you've also got the vice presidential candidates who are likely to be out, and they need Secret Service protection as well. But after what happened July 13th and the confidence that has been shook of the Secret Service, what kinds of things are they hoping to uncover with this hearing happening today, led by Illinois U.S. Senator Dick Durbin?
During this hearing, we will hear from Acting U.S. Secret Service Director Ronald Rowe about the security failures on July 13th and what the Secret Service is doing to rectify those issues. We will also hear from FBI Deputy Director Paul Abate, who will provide an update on the FBI's investigation into the assassination attempt. This hearing follows a briefing the Secret Service to late. What organizational and on-the-ground changes has the Secret Service implemented since this occurred to ensure better security in the future? Which of these changes were in place in time for the Republican National Convention? And and which are still in the process of being implemented for future events such as Democratic National Convention.
So again, the Democratic National Convention next month in Chicago. And of course, you can wake up with us live each and every weekday morning. We'll be on the ground with the Center Square at the DNC in Chicago. Obviously, having been at the Republican National Convention earlier this month, seeing the security apparatus just days after the attempted assassination of Trump, it was a pretty secure event. There were multiple checkpoints to get in, barricades with 8-foot tall ironclad fencing, and then concrete barricades to block vehicles another several blocks out. I imagine they're going to have the same thing in Chicago with a perimeter around the United Center and a perimeter around McCormick Place. But you've also got, all those questions that Durbin had laid out. And again, we live to tape, streaming at America's Talking Network on YouTube. If that stream drops, be sure to check out the segments if there's anything you missed, because we do record those locally, so you can get that. So a lot to tackle here with this hearing today. Again, 9 o'clock Central Time. But you had Durbin ask a whole host of questions. What security updates have there been since July 13th? Why was the shooter able to do reconnaissance with a drone hours beforehand? And all the other questions swirling around the security failures there. But some other angles that Durbin and Democrats have already shown they're wanting to tackle, and that's the, quote, availability of a very popular rifle, they acknowledge.
What challenge does the proliferation of weapons present to the Secret Service mission to protect current and former presidents, vice presidents, families, and major candidates moving forward? These are fundamental questions which will be asked tomorrow. There is an urgent need for bipartisan collaboration in Congress to provide these answers to the American people as soon as possible, so that the Secret Service can begin to rebuild trust and more effectively fulfill its mission. The work has already begun, and tomorrow's joint hearing will help bring about transparency and accountability for Secret Service failures in Butler, Pennsylvania on July 13th.
So again, that's going to be this morning, just after 9 o'clock our time, 10 o'clock Eastern time in Washington, D.C. An examination of the security failures leading to the assassination attempt on former President Trump. So we'll obviously, a lot of news is going to be made about that hearing, especially since an Illinois native, former director of the Secret Service, Cheadle, she resigned. So here we are with a acting director for the Secret Service set to answer a lot of tough questions, and apparently already having some statements released saying that, there were failures, no question. All right, Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell with America's Talking Network each and every weekday morning. Follow me anywhere, Bishop on Air, and be sure to get the newsletter with the Center Square.
That we've stemmed the tide of border crossings, and so actually we've seen some of the lowest numbers of border crossings in the last 2 years over the last several months, and I check on that weekly, talk to the White House and others to make sure that that's still the case.
We've always seen 300,000 to 400,000 crossings a year, but to go to nearly 2 million plus every year since Joe Biden took office 3.5 years ago, it's just phenomenal to blame it on Abbott. I mean, the citizens of Texas can't take this any longer. Why should they be held responsible to pay the freight on bad Washington, D.C. White House policy?
State Representative Brad Halbrook responding to Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker about the ongoing border crisis and an expected surge heading to Chicago ahead of the Democratic National Convention next month. Welcome back. It's Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. Thanks for being with us. And a lot to tackle here with the questions all around the border, security of the border, but also with the prospect of getting thousands more migrants in Chicago ahead of the Republican National Convention. Senator Durbin, U.S. senior senator from Illinois, yesterday on the Senate floor, he talked about a hearing ahead of the convention to look at the security failures with the Secret Service. But he also took a moment during his speech on the Senate floor yesterday to be critical of the ongoing possibility of a surge of migrants heading to Chicago ahead of the DNC.
Madam President, you know that you and I share concerns about tens of thousands of people coming to our beloved city of Chicago. We want them to be safe every minute of every day. We want to make sure that the agencies, state, local, and federal law enforcement agencies, are doing the very best job. They have disclosed to both of us their plans, and it looks good on paper. My question is, what did you learn in Butler, Pennsylvania that is now being applied to the original plan to keep Chicago safe? I might also say the threat or promise of Governor Abbott to send thousands of migrants on buses into this convention center in the midst of all of the visitation that's taking place is irresponsible and mean-spirited. These people, and I've spoken to many of them coming off the buses from Texas, they're given promises there of jobs and accommodations and special treatment that just aren't realistic. They're doing what they can to protect their families, but they're doing it at the expense of the government and law enforcement in the region. When we're having the responsibility of a national convention, we can't afford to let such a thing occur without complaining and calling the attention of the Texas governor to the irresponsibility of this action.
So Governor J.B. Pritzker also being asked about this yesterday at an unrelated event, how to handle an expected surge. And he talked about how the Biden administration, the Biden-Harris administration, he says, has tamped down on the border being porous, and even making a claim that there have been fewer border crossings in the past several weeks than there have been in the past 2 years. But if you look at the data, and we'll pull some of that up here in a bit, the data clearly shows that, well, there's been a substantial increase in the number of border crossers during the Biden administration. Here is Governor J.B. Pritzker yesterday.
As you know, we have a partnership with Cook County and with the city of Chicago. There was an awful lot of planning that went into effect back in the early part of this year, and we're excited about the Democratic National Convention coming. We're also excited to have this partnership in place, as you know, and you can go to the City of Chicago's website to see how many beds are currently occupied, how many beds are available, and also that we have a plan for expanding that if necessary. So far, we have not seen the influx that we might have expected, and one of the reasons for that is because despite the fact that Donald Trump told Republicans to walk away from an immigration bill that would have helped us actually secure the border, that the president has nevertheless put in place a series of agreements with countries throughout Central America and North America, including Mexico, to make sure that we've stemmed the tide of border crossings. And so actually we've seen some of the lowest numbers of border crossings in the last 2 years over the last several months. And I check on that weekly, talk to the White House and others to make sure that that's still the case.
So again, the governor says that there have been fewer illegal border crossings in the past few weeks as compared to the past 2 years. Well, State Representative Brad Halbrook, he's actually been to the southern U.S. border. He went there earlier this year and saw firsthand the Biden-Harris border policies that are causing all kinds of alarm, from humanitarian issues and human trafficking and so on to the taxpayer costs, which in the state of Illinois, it's upwards to $1 billion plus and $900 million more for the current fiscal year that just started earlier this month. So here's Halbrook talking about what he's experienced on the ground at the southern U.S. border.
Right. Well, so it was amazing just to talk about that real quickly, the January trip to the border to see exactly what was going on. And again, this is predictable for the Democrats to blame their problems on Republicans every chance they get. But I think, they are going to run out of money eventually. Money does not solve this problem. They talk about the Republicans failed or defeated the border bill, when in fact you can look at the numbers and see almost to the day when Joe Biden took office 3.5 years ago, he removed all of the executive orders, rescinded them or put his own in that allowed traffic to come across the border at nearly 3 to 4 to 5 times the rate of the previous administration. You know, we've always seen 300,000 to 400,000 crossings a year, but to go to nearly 2 million plus every year since Joe Biden took office 3.5 years ago, it's just phenomenal to blame it on Abbott. I mean, the citizens of Texas can't take this any longer. Why should they be held responsible to pay the freight on bad Washington, D.C. White House policy? I don't understand it, but it's predictable and understandable of Democrats to say things like this.
And again, Halbrook being asked to react to Governor Pritzker, who was talking about the border, saying that Democrats are getting a handle on it. But again, if you look at the statistics, and this is the article we put out at thecentersquare.com. For nearly 2 years, Chicago's received more than 45,000 non-citizen migrants being transported from the southern U.S. border. And earlier this month, at the Republican National Convention, Texas Governor Greg Abbott vowed to continue transporting migrants to sanctuary cities like Chicago that don't enforce federal immigration law. And the governor was, of course, asked about the border, but then he went even further to be asked about it and exactly how they're going to handle the surge.
Well, of course, we have a governor in Texas who cares nothing for the human beings who have crossed the border, who are in his state. He frankly ships them all across the country, including to Chicago, threatened to do it again when he was at the RNC. But we've not seen any evidence of him increasing the numbers that have been sent to the city of Chicago.
So again, hadn't seen that yet, but look at the statistics. Monthly encounters at ports of entry of foreign nationals with no lawful basis to enter increased from nearly 20,000 at the end of the Trump administration to more than 117,000 in June 2024 under the Biden administration. The cost of Abbott transporting migrants from the southern U.S. border to places like Chicago and elsewhere, $148 million it's cost Texas taxpayers. But again, for legal services, housing, school, even non-citizen healthcare subsidies, the Illinois budget costing taxpayers is $900 million for this fiscal year. And even before that, since August 2022, the cost has gone up above $1 billion. So a lot of that is the subsidies of non-citizen migrants. And clearly there's a lot of things that are costing taxpayers. But what are the solutions? You've got Representative Halbrook laying those out.
Nothing's going to change for the better for these illegal aliens and for Americans until the border is under control. And right now it's absolutely not under control. You know, we saw what Governor Abbott's done, and he was able to tighten some things up. Well, the crossings have just moved further to the west. I think those folks are still coming across the border. They're just coming across in a different place. And that's what happens, right? You have government influence this or that area of life, and it just does something differently somewhere else, right? We tighten up regulations here and something else goes awry, or vice versa. So until, in my view, until Donald Trump is elected president, reinstates these border controls, gets a handle on this thing, I think what Illinoisans and Americans are really most concerned about right now is how these illegal aliens and how they're going to affect elections. And I think that's a real problem. We saw how the Democrats stole the election 3.5 years ago, and the concern is that this is going to even be worse in this year and in the coming year. So I think that's a big concern, and it's just got to get a grip on it, got to get a control on what's going on. Right now, we don't have that. And
it was State Representative Brad Halbrook sharing with us some of his thoughts yesterday in response to Governor Pritzker's comments on how to deal with the expected surge of non-citizen migrants heading to Chicago ahead of the Democratic National Convention. It is Illinois in Focus Daily. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell each and every weekday morning, waking you up here with Illinois in Focus Daily.
The truth is, there are a lot of very weird weird, strange things coming out of both the Republican nominee and the vice presidential nominee on the Republican side. I mean, there's this consistent kind of talk about Donald Trump's fear of sharks. I'm not sure why that's relevant to becoming president of the United States. There's the talk about couches and dolphins on the vice presidential candidate's case.
Yeah, well, we've known for a long time that he's trying to pave the way to the White House, and I think he senses a real opportunity, and so he is going to do what he needs to do to make that happen, I think.
Is Pritzker being asked to be the vice presidential nominee? A question that we've been delving into as the governor continues to be asked that question time and again, every time he's in front of members of the media. It is Illinois in Focus Daily. I'm Greg Bishop. Thanks for hanging out with us each and every weekday morning. Wake up with us around 8 o'clock. We go live at America's Talking Network with the Center Square. And you can get the Center Square's newsletter by going to thecentersquare.com. But you can also get the podcast each and every weekday morning. Just search Illinois in Focus Daily. So the governor's been asked time and again since President Joe Biden announced that he was not going to run for re-election and ultimately endorsed Kamala Harris to be the vice president, the presidential nominee. Now, that all has to be confirmed at the Democratic National Convention coming up in Chicago next month. 20 some odd days away here. The Center Square will be on the ground in Chicago, so be looking out for that. But the governor asked time and again, not just by national media. For instance, last week he was asked by MSNBC if he'd received vetting materials. He explicitly said no, and then the following day he was asked what kind of conversations he's having with the vice president, looking at possibly being a running mate if she is the Democrat nominee for president, and Pritzker simply saying that he's not going to divulge private conversations other than to say that he is all in for Harris. So again, yesterday he was asked at an unrelated event about is he being vetted to be the next VP candidate.
This may be the 73rd time that you and your colleagues have asked this question. I'm not going to talk about those conversations, but I've had many conversations and continue to, as I have for weeks and weeks and weeks when Joe Biden was going to be our nominee, and now with Kamala Harris as our likely nominee. I talk to the campaign regularly because I want to do everything I can to make sure that Kamala Harris wins and that Donald Trump does not. I'm sorry, would I tell you? I think I've been very transparent about almost everything about being governor and everything that's occurred. And in this case, all I can say is that my guess is over the next 10 or 14 days, we'll all know who the vice presidential nominee is.
Next 10 or 14 days, we could see who Harris is going to pick to be the VP. But there's been this interesting theme that Democrats across the country have been using, and that's characterizing Republicans as, quote, weird. And all the memes that are out there fascinating about this, with Democrats, showing pictures of Stephen Miller or Roger Stone and saying, oh, they're weird. And then Republicans counter with, pictures of the former Biden administration's nuclear waste handler who ended up, being a cross-dresser who stole women's luggage from airports, or, an assistant press secretary at the White House, or a whole, people showing up, men who have beards wearing dresses. It's interesting to see, just stepping back as an observer, how this line of talk calling Republicans weird, but then Republicans countering saying that Republicans are, quote, weird, and then showing images of who they say are weird. But the governor seems to have gotten some kind of, indication that that's the term that they're using.
Well, I've listened to it. I've actually talked about it yesterday. The truth is there are a lot of very weird, strange things coming out of both the Republican nominee and the vice presidential nominee on the Republican side. I mean, there's this consistent kind of talk about Donald Trump's fear of sharks. I'm not sure why that's relevant to becoming president of the United States. There's the talk about couches and dolphins on the vice presidential candidate's case. And it's just, I don't understand. We should be talking about the issues that are important to working families across the United States. That's what Kamala Harris is talking about. That's what all of us ought to be focused on.
So the issues we'll talk about here in a moment, but State Representative Brad Halbrook, when I chatted with him yesterday, speculated that it's been known for a while Pritzker's vying for higher office.
Yeah, well, we've known for a long time that he's trying to pave the way to the White House, and I think he senses a real opportunity, and so he is going to do what he needs to do to make that happen, I think.
And Halbrook also talking about the issues, things that he's heard. Of course, some of the major points are abortion and helping working class families. The Democrats are heralding and Republicans, Trump, the Republican nominee, saying that the border's out of control, inflation's out of control, the economy's out of control, international policy's out of control, all under the Biden-Harris administration. But to some of these issues and the backs and forth there, here's Halbrook.
Well, I don't think they're winning issues, but I mean, I think it's predictable, and I think it's to be expected from a Democrat leader, especially the governor of the sixth largest state of the nation. I mean, I think the rhetoric is just completely hypocritical. He talks about these things about protecting the rights of women while denying the rights of the unborn to have an opportunity at life. He talks about protecting the rights of workers and working families, and all the while he's giving out hundreds of millions of dollars to our foreign adversaries that we now hear in a recent hearing Friday in Michigan over the Goshen battery plant that they have direct connects to slave labor. So I think it's just completely hypocritical when he talks about these issues, and hopefully Illinoisans and Americans are paying attention to what's going on here and will read through his crazy rhetoric.
And also, you've got the questions about just the ongoing taxpayer cost of all of this. We've talked about the taxpayer costs to the migrant crisis, not just the humanitarian costs, which are dreadful, but the taxpayer costs, which are climbing more and more and more because of the Biden-Harris administration's Boris policy. But what about Pritzker? What would it be like if he, from Illinois, was to be the running mate for Kamala Harris?
We see his agenda as a far left Marxist agenda. They don't care about the Constitution. They don't care about the border. They continue to tax, borrow, and spend Illinoisans. So I think we'll just see that all that ramped up on steroids if he was to become the second most powerful person in the United States as a vice president. I'm not really sure that Illinoisans can afford much more J.B. Pritzker. I'm pretty sure that America can't afford any more of the Democrat policies that, again, hundreds of thousands, millions of illegal immigrants are pouring across the border, the illegal drugs, the sex trafficking. This is not going to go, it's not going well, and it's not going to go well for America.
So the governor was at two different events yesterday. We saw a little bit of the morning event, which we'll talk about in another segment, of him signing a birth equity law. He was at an afternoon event up in Chicago talking about Medicaid expansion. But again, in the Q&A, he was asked, what was it, maybe now for the 76th time, if he's being vetted to be the Democrats' vice presidential candidate.
I'll correct your timeline. I think I said no on Tuesday morning, that I had not received vetting documents. And then subsequently I was asked the question, just so you can go back and look at your records. And what I've said repeatedly since then is that, I'm not going to talk about the conversations that I've had with the vice president or with her campaign, other than to say that I have committed myself to Kamala Harris, that I will go out and work my heart out for her to win this election, because we cannot have Donald Trump as president of the United States.
So obviously, the politics there saying that Trump should not be president of the United States, but are the politics changing, especially with the migrant crisis impacting minority communities in a city like Chicago? Halbrook, being from downstate Illinois, has talked to people up in Chicago as well, also visiting the southern U.S. border, and he says that there could be a sea change here.
Right. I think there is a definite outcry and outrage, and rightfully so, of different voting blocks and different minorities in these cities. We saw the outcry at the Chicago City Council meetings over the last several months, and it continues. They know what's going on, and they know that the city can't handle the pressure from these additional residents. And to think that maybe there's going to be another, I don't care what number you put with it, but if there's another 20 or 25,000 or 30,000 citizens flow into the city over the next few weeks, I just think that it's going to be outrageous if this continues to happen.
A lot more to come on all of this. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. America's Talking Network with the Center Square and Illinois in Focus Daily. Thank you for the applause there. I'm Greg Bishop. Be sure to follow me anywhere. Just search Bishop on Air. And you can stay updated with what's going on at thecentersquare.com. One last segment coming up for you guys. Now law is a measure that Democrat Governor J.B. Pritzker called the Birth Equity Act. And if you go to thecentersquare.com, you can get the newsletter, wake up each and every morning with the headlines, and go and read about this new birth equity law that the governor signed yesterday. So we'll pull this up and share with you some of the details from yesterday's news conference where the governor laid this out. But as Jim Talamonte from the Center Square reports, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker has signed an amended version of House Bill 5142, which mandates the health insurance policies in the state of Illinois, regulated by the state of Illinois, have competitive Medicaid reimbursement rates for doulas, lactation consultants, home visitors, and other community-based providers. Not everybody was on board with this, though. Of course, the governor signing this legislation yesterday, having a signing ceremony where he was surrounded by the bill's sponsors, and they obviously were happy that he put his signature on this. But here's some of what the governor talked about yesterday with the birth equity law and how there's a lot more still to do.
So, as you know, critical access hospitals, safety net hospitals, those I think are the ones that you're referring to, are a real, and those that aren't covered by that are the focus of a lot of work that we need to do about providing midwifery services as well as doulas, and making sure that we're addressing the broad issue of maternal health. It's not been done adequately, even in some of the best hospitals, when we talk about women of color in particular. And so that's why we've got to change the way this system operates. One of the things that we've done is expanded Medicaid to pay for particularly culturally sensitive doulas, culturally sensitive provision of services for women of color. And so there's a lot of work to do. That's why I said that earlier, and I think you heard it consistently. We're not finished. This is an awfully good beginning to something that's important for us to accomplish.
So the governor taking those questions yesterday, but not everybody was on board with this. Republicans overwhelmingly voted against this measure in both the House and the Senate. State Representative C.D. Davidsmeyer talking with Jim Talamonte from the Center Square yesterday, concerned about bad outcomes.
My concern is when you allow others to provide these types of care, do they really have the training if something were to go wrong?
And he also discussed how anytime you put regulations on a company, including insurance companies, costs expected to go up.
Anytime you require insurers to provide an additional service that they're currently not providing, it will cost more money.
So a lot to be said about just the taxpayer costs of certain types of programs like Medicaid, Medicare, but also the consumer costs of these types of policies when people go out to buy health insurance. And one thing to consider too is you see a lot of headlines of Pritzker signs legislation impacting insurance, but it only can impact state regulated insurance, not insurance that's regulated by the federal government. So when Illinois regulates an insurance company, it only impacts a portion of the overall insurance plans that are available to consumers. But for the most part, the taxpayer cost is because of state employee health insurance that is regulated by the state. So there is going to be a taxpayer cost to all of this. Some other taxpayer costs. Yesterday, the governor, he took part in another news conference where he laid out the Medicaid expansion that's happened here. Let me pull this up for you. This is from a news release. And expanded assistance includes support for violence prevention, housing, food, and transitions from incarceration. So this is the Healthcare Transformation 1115 waiver, demonstration waiver that'll allow the Illinois Department of Healthcare and Family Services to begin nation-leading work to expand Medicaid coverage. Assistance will soon address root causes of health disparities such as housing and food insecurity and help individuals transform from incarceration. So a little bit more on this from yesterday. You had the Health and Family Services Director, Elizabeth Whitehorn, address some of the things that the Medicaid waiver is going to provide.
The first addresses a specific set of health-related social needs, including housing support for individuals who may be transitioning out of a long-term care facility, out of foster care, or after a period of experiencing homelessness.
So housing now seeming to be part of this this taxpayer subsidized Medicaid program that's going to be funded through your tax dollars and federal tax dollars. So the Medicaid coverage being expanded through a waiver in Illinois, and there's some firsts for the country in this waiver, according to the HFS director.
Next, Illinois is the first state approved to address community violence under an 1115 waiver, allowing for screening and needs assessment, trauma therapy, and other services for Medicaid beneficiaries who have survived violence or are currently experiencing or at risk of experiencing violence. This work will support and complement the state's ongoing initiatives under the Reimagined Public Safety Act and will be coordinated closely with the Office of Firearm Violence Prevention.
So we've already seen the state put out $180+ million for violence intervention and also summer youth programs for jobs. And what this waiver ultimately is going to do is it's going to allow for matching federal tax dollars to come into the state of Illinois for these types of programs, violent assistance and such. But you've also got other things that are being added on to this waiver that Illinois is going to be able to be a first in the nation to provide.
Finally, Illinois is among one of the first cohorts of states to provide reentry services for individuals being released from a carceral setting, including coverage of pre-release services that can begin up to 90 days before release. By moving toward Medicaid coverage of services that have otherwise been provided in siloed state agencies and from different levels of government, we can propel the groundbreaking work of this administration to prevent and end homelessness, to prevent firearm violence, and to better support reentry.
So now it's about implementation and putting those dollars, your tax dollars from the state and federal government to work. This is, obviously Medicaid's a huge program. We're talking billions and billions and billions of dollars, especially when you take into account the state and federal tax dollars. It is Illinois in Focus Daily, keeping you updated on what you need to know to get started here in the land of Lincoln. I'm Greg Bishop. Be sure to like, subscribe, hit that notification bell with America's Talking Network. Get the podcast each and every weekday morning if you can't watch us live here. But also go to thecentersquare.com and subscribe to the daily newsletter so you can stay up to date right here with Illinois in Focus Daily. Have a great day.
It's